Good morning. We're going to have a fun discussion today. I'm joined by Christina, who is unbelievably funny and extraordinarily smart. And I got the pleasure of meeting Christina last fall. And one of the things that really caught my attention was how diligent and mission focused she is on making sure that instruction makes a difference and that it's a measurable difference. And kind of right from the get-go, I knew that the folks at Allen Interactions had a deep kinship with Christina, and I am excited to talk with her today about change management. Can you give just a little bit of introduction about who you are and your background, Christina?
Sure. Hey, thank you. And those are very kind words. I have 12 years of experience as a learning professional. I've worked for healthcare and manufacturing, so Cleveland Clinic, Christiana Care, Houston Methodist, Freudenberg, Osram, and have been a practitioner scholar, master's in Instructional Design Technology, Strategic Leadership, and my doctorate studied interprofessional teams within an academic medical center, studying the transitions of organizations within organizations at Cleveland Clinic.
So just a little bit of thought leadership in your background. And so we're doing a couple of things together, and we'll talk about those kind of throughout our discussion. But you mentioned that you had put together what sounds like a really compelling paper on secondary traumatic stress. You want to give a quick teaser of that new publication?
Sure. With the pandemic, with COVID-19, we're going through, as we talk about on change, the emotional changes, and there's post-traumatic stress syndrome, which is for the frontline caregivers, those that are delivering care directly to the patients. But there's secondary traumatic stress syndrome, and secondary traumatic stress syndrome is the people that are developing delivering the indirect care. Those are the family. Those are the ripple effects. And the paper is called, the compassion fatigue is another word for secondary traumatic stress, and it's for what is the second wave of the pandemic. And you can find it in the American College of Healthcare Executive, ACHE, as well as there is a blog posting with ATD as well on the same subject matter.
Very cool. This is going to be interesting and fascinating stuff to read, both in the healthcare space, as well as things that are studied and uncovered about our own lives, about the amount of change and how rapidly it has come apart. I say come apart because we naturally tend to want to do lots of stuff when there is a new variable, and in this case it's things like all the in-person meetings move to Zoom, and then once we all move to Zoom, then our calendars got completely full with meetings all day long, and lots of things have changed upon top of change, and it's unsustainable, and some of these have kind of lasting effects. One of the things that I'm noticing personally is change in my own preferences, or at least the dials are turning up on my own preferences for things that I like. And I'll be really interested to see how lots of these things start to unfold and what we learn. So from that, let's segue and talk a little bit about change initiatives. We're, as I mentioned before, a couple of things together with Allen Interactions and Christina, and you're hosting an upcoming webinar on creating a playbook for change management success, and that's teased, I think, in the description of this live stream, so you can find more information there. But let's just kick off the discussion with a kind of a simple question: Where do you think organizations usually fail when launching a new change initiative?
And I think, the big thing is, Christopher, is that change is changing. And how we focus is not the new normal, but it is the newest normal, because it's changing so often, right? Yeah. And so what's happening with that happens, like there's three things that happen with failure in organizations. One is the emotional portion of change. People get very caught up in the rational and the logic and the procedures and the policies, yet not connecting to the emotional change. Two is treating change as that it's not long lasting, that it's a short burst. And even if it's a 1-year project, when it's done, it's done. Well, it's not really done, right? Because it's long lasting and you've changed how you've done things. And the last part, where I think sometimes we all forget, is change is about loss. Even if it's a good change, you're letting go of what you feel comfortable. I mean, just recently, change could be prepared and you could be not prepared. And like with the COVID-19, how many of us were prepared to go and work from home? We actually did, Alan Interactions and myself, we did a co-created playbook on remote working. And we pulled people we had over 300 people participating in it and created this co-creation playbook. It was really successful. But the biggest part was no one was expecting it to happen so fast. And even with the changes that are happening now and the newest normal is how are we doing virtual onboarding? How are we connecting? How are we keeping connected? And like you said, you're starting to figure out what are your preferences and what resonates with you and what doesn't. Well, that's the same thing with our employees. What's resonating with them and what their preferences and their changes and what's meaningful has shifted. And I think that's really important that organizations focus on the emotion, the lasting impact, and the idea of loss.
There's something that you touched on in there, and one of the reasons why change fails is that we treat it as a one-time thing. Mm-hmm. And I think in learning and development, when we think about a new learning initiative or launching a new course, it's kind of like a singular moment. And we know that it's going to take more than that. We need to come back. We need an opportunity to practice so that we feel confident and competent that we will perform when asked, and it will be the right performance. Not just I'm confident that I can do this thing, but now is the time for me to do this thing, right?
Exactly.
And I think you're right in that when we think about moving or doing something different, it's often hurry up and have the change happen. And in our minds, we think of hurry up and have the change happen as a singular event. And there is a lot of missed opportunity there, I think, to support someone over a longer period of time, especially when it's their profession, right? We are supporting people who this is their career, this is their livelihood. And most of us want to find a way to be successful, and we get joy out of being successful. So it's a honorable mission, you might say, to really make sure that you help someone through that process. Let's talk a little bit about preparation. So, but before the change, when we're starting to install the want to.
The want to, I love that. The want to.
Yeah.
I think, even thinking about one of the easiest ways to think about change when people are thinking about is that when somebody, as you were talking about their careers, is that when we're bringing somebody in and we're onboarding them to the organization, there's a loss of their old, or I think that even though there's a gain, it's a very positive, but if there's changes, and sometimes we think it's a singular event, like we have that 4-hour or that one day event of onboarding and that's it. But in reality, the beauty is having that entire continuum of multiple connection points and creating that irresistible place to work. So, for example, using something like that, or even using like what's happening with COVID, you're prepared for a change, you're preparing for the change, or boom, the change has happened, and what do we do next? And one of the things that I have to say that, in my research is adaptation is a superpower. That is the piece, is being able to be flexible, to be able to understand where people are and meet them where they are, and then to plan accordingly. And I know sometimes, like example, would just happen with COVID. When could we plan? It just happened. Well, it's still using almost the idea of a plan, do, check, act. I think Deming had it and Schuhart had it right. And you're planning, you're doing, then you check where you are, and then you act and you make iterations. And the thing with change is that change is always changing. Where we talk about, so sometimes change is happening and we're experiencing this right now. And there was actually a Forbes article this morning that I read about how change is changing, that we think it's linear We go through the Kubler-Ross, the denial, resistance, exploration, and acceptance. But in reality, what's happening now, sometimes even before we get to our people get to acceptance, so another change happens. And it's like this constant ricochet. And how are we helping people being flexible and adapting and leading and creating stability for our people during those rapid changes?
Yeah, I think about expectations a lot in the preparation phase. If if you've had a couple of initiatives that have gone well, you can set the expectation inside an organization or with a group of people that we're good at change. And when you botch it, and then and then something else forces you to change yet again, you've kind of installed a potential belief that we're not very good at change. And so, then I'm on my own and I'm going to kind of do my own thing. I'm going to half listen, and
I think you just froze, Christopher. Well, what you're talking about is when you're not good at change, you're not good at communication, you're not good at building connection. So when you're not good at change, it's actually you've broken the trust. Senior leadership has broken the trust with the front line and with each one of us. And like you said, you feel alone and not anchored. So how do we help people connect and feel trust? And that's, doing what you say and saying what you do. It's also like marketing. You're going to tell them what you're going to tell them, then you're going to tell them, then you tell them what you told them. So that's really important. And also in follow through for change, you've done your preparation, you've gone through the change, and then it's afterwards and telling people that you want to be heard or feel like they're being heard. So follow up, doing like an after action review, checking to see if what the changes worked, hearing the expectations, the feeling, the outcomes, and actually, building that trust is being forgiving and kind and saying, okay, so it didn't work. That's okay. What can we do to make it work? Make it work next time, or help push this process out further, and in helping achieve your milestones. I think we lost Christopher. Okay, so maybe he'll join us. So we've talked about the upcoming playbook, the webinar. And the webinar, we've actually changed the name of the playbook to the Ultimate Change Management Playbook. And what's exciting about that is that, again, we're doing a co-creation. There's a lot of education that's out there. There's a lot of academics. There's a lot of models. People have their own models within their companies. But like we said, change is changing. How do we handle the newest normal? Well, we could go through and tell you a lot about all the different types of change management, even the Allen behavioral change model. However, the issue is there's a reality that's happening out there, and let's do the collective wisdom of the crowd and be able to collect what people are doing, the practitioners, and put it together into a playbook. So it's going to be highly interactive tomorrow, collecting all the information. And then everybody that's registered for the webinar will receive a copy of, hi.
Hi.
Everybody who's registered will receive a copy of the co-created playbook. And the playbook will be covering, we'll cover the first part, we'll cover like a cursory overview of different types of change models. And then it'll be exactly what we've just been talking about. What do you do before the change? What's during the change, the things that are going on, and then after the change. And then two other things that people always ask when I've taught change in grad school or when we're teaching change in organizations is, how do you handle multiple changes? There's like change overload and competing priorities. So that's one of the things we're going to be talking about tomorrow, as well as the change that doesn't happen. And that's just exactly what you were just talking when you froze and walked away, is the change that doesn't happen. And the change, how do you diagnose it? How do you figure out what the symptoms are? How do you create and actually regroup and then be able to move forward? So those are the 5 subjects that are going to be our 5 sections of the playbook. And we hope people will participate. send information in, and then be, the happy recipients of the collective wisdom of LinkedIn and people in learning and development.
Awesome. I am so sorry about that. Who knows what happened? but
Technology keeps us humble. It keeps us humble.
It does, for sure. Do we want to talk a little bit about successful things for follow through?
Sure. And so when you follow
maybe
up,
after the initiative has been.
Sure. Follow-up would be one of the tools that I love using is an after-action review, an AAR. It's used in emergency situations. It's also, people may be familiar with it as a post-mortem in project management or hot wash. The idea, though, is that, in healthcare, saying a post-mortem has a totally different feel to it. So we stuck with the after action review and bringing those people together, running, focus groups or interviews with people. It's like less than 45 minutes and asking people, what went well, what didn't go so well, and what might we stop, start, and continue. Very quick. But when you collect that information, it can inform you on how to make the next change. It could be used at milestones. And also it really gives people a feeling. And like you were talking about earlier about how when things don't go so well and people start not to trust change or trust the leadership about change, when you start using something as simple as that, what that does is start to help build that trust that your voice is heard, you're a valued individual, and then you're able to take your stakeholder information and make those shifts. Because just like change is happening, organizational cultures are changing, people are shifting on what their expectations and what does it mean to feel like belong to an organization and to be cared.
The expectation component on follow through is something that really resonates with me a lot. When we've successfully helped someone gain a new skill, so they're ready to start on their own change journey and put it in application. If all of those people around that person have different expectations of what a good performance looks like, it's really hard for that individual to want to keep up. I mean, the peer pressure of not carrying the manual with you. And if the manual has the checklist and you're supposed to actually use the manual when you go through this procedure, if everyone else around you doesn't carry the manual with, you're not going to carry the manual with. And then those are the types of things that start to erode or slip away good habits. And so for an individual who has gained a new skill, you want to set the expectation that those of you around you, when you go back to try this new performance, are going to be supportive of you trying that new performance. If not everybody has gone through the whole total change experience and gotten upskilled on whatever is the new performance, there can be some discomfort when you see yourself moving in the new direction and everyone else is still going in the old direction. Is it okay for me to do this? Should I revert back because I'm making other people uncomfortable? And those expectations can be well set by the organization in and around formal training and performance support and some other things. And an important component when we're asking people to make a big leap.
Exactly. And it's really creating a learning environment to the organization. And just as you're saying, those things of like, am I doing the right thing? Should I be doing what? Those are all emotionally based. It's not rationally based. It's emotionally based. Nobody wants to do a bad job. Everybody wants to be seen as competent, seen to be part of a group and have that feeling. That's why it's really important. It's that old business school saw, management by walking around. Well, sometimes people use it as management by wandering aimlessly, right? They go out, but they don't know how to connect. So giving people the opportunity to have that ability to do humble inquiry and go and connect and talk with people, the leaders, because really that part of accelerating and adapting change is really comes down to those frontline leaders with their direct reports and talking and listening and hearing what they're feeling. And that's when they can catch those cognitive dissonances where we're telling you one thing, we thought we told you that, but you heard something totally different. So, hey, let's regroup and then reset. And again, that goes to, being forgiving with yourself as a leader, having compassion for yourself, but then also being empathetic with your direct reports and being able to listen to them.
Mm-hmm. So last thing that I had on the docket for us to talk about is, let me start with this quick analogy. When we're building pretty significant learning courses, we're often, as masters of instruction, we're often very reliant on subject matter experts to help us navigate the waters of what does a good performance look like? What are the likely symptoms that someone might recognize when the performance is going off course? Can you help us write and explain what that context is all about? Well, those people are busy, and those people are often the top performers in some particular space. And so not only does the business need their help crafting training so other people can do what they do, but they're also in demand to keep performance moving along. And I bring this analogy up because I think there are a lot of us who are really happy and willing to help their organizations move forward, especially when the change is unplanned like it is currently. We're looking to push in a new direction and make sure that we're being as helpful as possible. As someone who is in charge of a big change initiative, could you talk a little bit about how to source help that helps? We might come up with a foursome of these: change the changes, want tos, doing, and
sourcing help that helps. I love it. Because exactly, it goes to, help. People have all these wonderful, kind intentions, especially like in an organization you can have where people really enthusiastically want to help the change. Unfortunately, sometimes what happens is their efforts are counterintuitive, and instead of moving you forward, they're actually retarding or pulling it back. Just like in organizations, you have those informal leaders, the people that people listen to. And when you have those people, like you said, the ones that really understand what's going on, have the ear of their colleagues and are trusted, and sometimes they're not even like leaders. They can be, they're informal leaders. How do you take that tacit knowledge that they have and make it explicit? Well, I think what part of it is negotiating as, first you make sure that you have an executive sponsor for your leadership change, and then identifying and collecting change advocates across your system. But when you come up with that idea of what a change advocate is, that you actually, or like when you're using a SME for creating a training piece, is that you negotiate. First, you are very clear, like we talk about expectations, you're very clear on what that role is. What does it require? What is the time? It's time bound. What's the time that's required? Is it 10, 20% of their time? Get commitment, and then be able to utilize those people to be able to protect their time, protect them. So we're not taking those, high performing individuals, those people that everybody absolutely relies on, and exhausting them and burning them out. Because the reason why they're the high performers are because they don't know how to say no, and they'll just continue working. Now, the people that, offer help, and just like they say in the South, bless your heart, is being able to have those conversations with them. And again, that goes to, managing and walking around and talking and really having a pulse of what's going on in the organization. And when you have people that are helping, but they're not quite, is having a feed forward conversation. I know it's very John Maxwell, is, not talking about what they're doing wrong, because you don't want to, crush their soul. You want to be able to everybody to feel like they're part and they belong and they're honored. So, before you have that conversation to kind of reel them in, be really purposeful in what that conversation is and redirecting that effort. And then, I really do recommend is trying, when you're doing change, especially at that, senior level, and is having a thought partner or a thinking partner, somebody who can be objective, that you can bounce information off, and they can be your your trusted advocate or trusted advisor, and kind of prevent that whole emperor's new clothes. You think you're doing a great job, you think you're, and it's again, everybody has great intentions. Nobody wants to create harm or suffering or anything when it comes to change. And the problem is that sometimes at that senior level, we don't know how it trickles into multiple changes on the front line. So being able to have that thinking partner, I think, is really important.
Yes, I do too. I think having a safe best friend to explore ideas that, maybe aren't quite fully formed, but also, kind of get some feedback, or, even explore, or, Google search together,
Exactly.
when you're like halfway through an idea. Oh, I kind of remember someone, having tried this particular technique. Let's see if we can spark our memory.
Mm-hmm.
It's really, really valuable. Okay.
Exactly. There's a lot about disruptive innovation, disruption in the workplace and the marketplace. COVID was a massive change and disruption, but being able to have someone who's a trusted individual that you can have a conversation with, that you feel safe, I think is really important. And being able to be that objective to be able to say, I don't know, but hey, that is great. Go with it. Have you thought of this?
Okay. Last point. You are doing a webinar with Lisa Stortz tomorrow on change management. For those who are interested, they can find it in the description of this live stream, or you can go to alleninteractions.com/webinars for 2020. And we'd certainly love to have you. It's the webinar tomorrow is free. Certainly would love to have you sign up, and there's still space available. Well, thank you so much, Christina. Like I said at the onset, you are the best. And losing internet in the middle, and to come back and to see that the conversation was probably better than it was with me. It's just fantastic.
I really love my own opinion. So. Well, thank you so much for the opportunity, and I hope to see more people tomorrow at our webinar, and also to know that every person who registers will receive the ultimate change management playbook that reflects everyone's interactions during that webinar tomorrow.
Fantastic. We'll see you then. Thank you.
Thank you. Bye-bye.
Yeah, bye.